This is Christian Book Blurb, brought to you by author and songwriter Matt McChlery. Get a behind-the-scenes glimpse into the lives of some of your favourite Christian authors, hear about their books and faith. Also, why not check out my website, mattmcclery.com. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Christian Book Blurb podcast, where we like to encourage you in your discipleship one book at a time, as we meet some amazing Christian authors and learn about their books, their lives, and their faith. I am your host, Matt McChlery. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to have you on board. And on today's show, I'm going to be talking about an Advent journey for the whole family with the author, Rachel Yarworth. Hello, Rachel, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Matt. Thanks very much for having me.
It's really good to have you here. This is the month of November, and what I like to do in November is the two podcasts that I have coming out. I like to look at Advent devotionals or sort of Advent-themed books that listeners might learn about in November, because they still have a little bit of time to rush out and buy them just in time for Advent to begin. So that's what we do today. If you're listening to this and you haven't listened to the previous episode, in that one I was speaking with Amy Orr-Ewing about her new Advent book, Mary's Voice. And now today I'm speaking with Rachel Yarworth about her book that she's been involved in bringing together, which is called the Jesse Tree Anthology. We'll be getting onto that in a little while. But before we do, I just wanted to ask you, Rachel, I'm a dad with 3 kids, and I wanted to ask you about the idea of how we could celebrate Advent and journey towards the Christmas season together as a family. What might this look like for us?
It's a good question. As a mum with 3 kids, I think it works best when every family finds what works for them, really. For my family, we carved out a little bit of time to get together. When they were little, when my boys were little, it used to be at snuggly bedtimes. Now that they're older, the best time is usually just after tea when my husband's home from work. And then we just take that time while we're all sat together, take it in turns to read a short Bible passage together, chat about it, quickly pray. And it doesn't have to be long because, everyone's busy, everyone's got things to be doing, but just those small moments all really add up and help to keep us focused on the deeper meaning behind what can otherwise be a really crazy season.
It really can get a bit manic. Why is it important to include children in things like devotional times or sort of in the lead up to Advent? Why do it as a family? Isn't it just like a personal thing between us and God?
I think certainly for our family it's all about discipleship. I think that always begins in the home, and it's like the Bible says in Deuteronomy 11 where it says about teaching God's words to your children. And it says, talk about them when you're at home and when you're on the road, when you're going to bed and when you're getting up. And then a couple of verses later, we see that it's so that we and our children may flourish. So when God's word is a natural and essential part of our everyday lives, rather than just kind of sidelining it to Sunday school, once a week, our children grow up with it established in them and then they flourish. And, that's all of our desire for our kids, isn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say, is it the church's job to disciple your kids, or is it yours? What's your take on that?
It's got to be parents first and foremost. All through, the Bible, it's very clear. Absolutely, the church has a really important part to play. It really helps that our kids are not just getting the message at home, that, they're hearing it from others too, but it has to start in the home.
And I suppose when children see mum and dad living out their faith, that then has a positive impact on them as well, and it kind of, the cycle continues, rather than, you go over there and you learn this, and that's the end of it. It's if they see it embedded and worked out in the life of the parent, it'll really help them in their journey as well.
Absolutely.
So you have compiled an anthology called the Jesse Tree Anthology. Please, can you explain to our listeners what is an anthology?
Yeah, well, very simply, it's just a collection of multiple pieces of writing that have all been written by different authors and collected together, usually on the same theme, which in our case is Advent.
And have you done anything like this before?
No, categorically not. It was a new venture for me.
And so, what was your role in this new venture?
Well, I was the one that God kind of gave the ideas to, the idea of the anthology and the idea of the subject, and then I put a message out there and to see who would be interested, and lots of people were interested. It was amazing. And so then it was my responsibility to kind of commission all the writing, coordinate everyone, what chapters they were doing, what they were writing. And then when they sent their submissions in, I got to edit them, which was a bit scary just because I felt the responsibility of it. And then tie them all together. So there were lots and lots of different voices, which I love. I love the variety that we've got, but then tying them all together so there was like a continuous thread going, holding it together. So yeah, and I also wrote some of the questions people think about in prayers to pray, and did the illustrations, which was even more new to me than anything else. So yeah, there was quite a lot of work, but I didn't have to do a lot of writing.
So when you say illustrations, is this like a children's book where you've got like illustrations in the book, like the Gruffalo, for example, or how do the illustrations work in this context?
So yeah, I'm definitely not a good enough artist to do anything like the Gruffalo. They're very simple illustrations because like the vision that I had for it was to have simple pictures that could be used, children or adults who enjoy it, to colour them in, almost like as a kind of meditative practice. As you take the time to colour it in, it just gives your brain space to think about what you've been reading. And then the way we've done it is that the illustrations can either be cut out of the book or they can be downloaded from my website if people would rather not deface their book, and then hung on a little tree as decorations. So yeah, it's all part of that.
Okay, which ties in with the whole Jesse Tree idea, which we'll come to in just a minute. But we've been talking about gathering authors together. Yep. Yes. So how many entries has this Advent book got in?
So there are 25 chapters, one for every day through December up until and including Christmas Day.
Does that mean 25 authors?
Yes. Yeah, 25 chapters, each with a different... Well, each chapter has a contribution from a different author.
Okay, and can you tell us who some of these authors are that you have worked on this project?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably too many to list now, but so we have a wide range of authors. So we've got like from Christian fiction writers like Ruth Lee and Joy Margetts, and then we've got devotional writers like Emily Owen, inspirational teachers like Anne Calvert, and we've got some children's authors such as Joy V. So lots, I mean, there's lots and lots, and they're all brilliant writers, too many to mention, but those are the kind of people that we've got taking part.
Yeah, that sounds really, really interesting. Coming back to Jesse Tree, so the Jesse Tree Anthology. So if I went along to my local garden centre and I asked them for a Jesse Tree, I don't think they would be able to find one for me. So what is it? And how does this story fit well into the Advent season?
Okay, so yeah, the Jesse Tree isn't a literal tree, it's more like a family tree. It's essentially an ancient tradition that's based on the verses from Isaiah that talk about the stump of Jesse, who was the father of King David, and all his descendants who reigned in Israel. And Isaiah talked about how a new branch would grow from that stump, so it's clearly like a kind of family tree picture, and that the new branch from that stump will be a new king to bring justice and rule all the nations. So now we know that that king is talking about Jesus, and the Jesse Tree is like an artistic representation of Jesus's family tree that traces back some of his key ancestors and forerunners, not just as far as David and Jesse, but actually it goes all the way back to creation. And it fits, for me, it fits so beautifully as an Advent tradition, because like the Advent season represents the period of waiting in anticipation for Christmas. And I think for me, the Jesse Tree shows how all the history of the Old Testament right from the beginning was actually gearing up for the appearance of Jesus to reveal the purpose of it all.
So it's finding places in the Old Testament that kind of point forward to Jesus. So how does this then fit well into sort of an Advent rhythm or like an Advent preparation?
I think it really reflects that waiting and that anticipation. So, you know, every day that you're reading, the stories do go in kind of chronological order through the Bible. It starts with an explanation of the Jesse Tree, but then goes right back to the beginning. And so every step is like it gets you that bit closer to, in Advent, it's a day closer to Christmas. And in the chronology of the Bible, it's a step closer to the Christ being revealed. So, yeah, I think it's a good reflection, a nice rhythm to do every day, building up to that revelation.
And what makes your anthology stand out from the others? Because I know there's lots of other Jesse Tree books and things out there. How is the Jesse Tree Anthology different to those?
I think there are two main ways. Firstly, my family and I have used many of these Jesse Tree resources over the years and loved them. There are some brilliant ones out there. But I have looked for a long time and I was never able to find one that specifically focused on how each story pointed to Jesus. They told lots of the old stories, which are lovely and we love them, but they never really focused on this is, you know, Jesus is foreshadowed in this, which is really what I wanted, what I'm passionate about. So that was my main focus in releasing the book in the first place. And then the second thing, to the best of my knowledge, it's the only anthology that I know about for, you know, on the subject. And I felt it was really important while we're telling all these different stories of the different ancient friends of God, that we're telling those stories using the voices of a variety of modern day friends of God. It just felt like it brought a real richness to it that wouldn't have been there if it had just been my voice.
And all the different contributions you've woven skillfully together, was there one in particular that might have stood out or sort of touched you in some way as you were preparing them?
That is honestly like asking a mum to choose her favourite baby. I mean, yeah, all of them genuinely touched me in different ways. I'm happy to share. I could read to you if you like from a chapter.
I'd like you to share a bit of one of the chapters for us, just so we get a flavour of it, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, sure. I'll read to you from chapter 13 because it's about one of my favourite characters from the Bible. And this one was written by Leslie Crawford. She says, Rahab seems like an unlikely example of faith. She was an outsider, not one of God's people. She'd had a difficult life and hadn't always walked a good way. She was probably looked down on by others. But Rahab had heard of God and what he could do, and she believed. She knew that God was giving the Israelites the land, and she knew that if he was the real God, it made sense to be on his side. So she took action and made a deal with the spies. It was a wise decision. And because of Rahab's faith, she was saved when Jericho was conquered. She was rescued not because she did good deeds, but because of her trust in God. I think I'll leave it there, leave you wanting more.
Yeah, great. So who is the target audience of the book? Who do you hope will use the resource?
I want the resource to be as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. So certainly at the back of my mind I had families like my own family in mind, because it's something that we have enjoyed as a family and I know many other families do. But I also really wanted it to be available to individuals, maybe study groups if they wanted to. I deliberately kept the language jargon free wherever possible and accessible just to children or maybe new Christians who haven't been exposed to much church type language before. So yeah, very wide. I know current wisdom is to have a very clear, narrow target audience. I don't tend to write like that. I want anyone to be able to pick it up and read it.
And having had a look at it, there are other ways, sort of more interactive ways that you suggest that people can engage with the thought or the content. So there's the short little sort of reflective bit of writing that tells some of the story and points people to Jesus. You've already mentioned there's like some colouring in that you can do, or even cut that out and hang it on a little tree as you go through the Advent season if you want to do that. What else is there in there that helps people to engage with the content?
So we've got the Bible passage and then the reflection from the different authors. And then I think one of the things that Christians can struggle with sometimes is when the Bible feels a bit dry or God feels a bit far removed. And for me, one of the things that has helped me to engage and to break that pattern is having questions and prompts to make you think about how actually is this passage relevant for me. So I'm not just reading about somebody else's story, but looking at how it might relate to me and my struggles today. So we've got some questions that people might like to think about or might like to discuss in their families or study groups. And then we've got some prayer prompts. And again, people can use those how they like. They can read them verbatim if they want to, or they can just take them as like a framework and just to inspire their own prayers in a fresh way. So it's very much, not everyone will have time to engage with all the supplementary activities, but I hope that those who are able to take a little bit of time will find that it helps them to engage more deeply, and then they meet God in it, really.
And are you hoping to use this with your family this Advent?
Oh yes, absolutely. We've already got the decorations coloured out and printed off.
Oh, good. Well done. Forward thinking. Although I suppose they're lucky to get a head start because you've put the resource together. But
yeah,
that's really good. So how do you hope this whole book you've got, the Jesse Tree Anthology, how do you hope that will encourage people to grow in their discipleship? What might it do for them?
I think probably two ways. I'm hoping that it will help people to rediscover the Old Testament, maybe, because I know certainly for myself, when I was a young Christian, I used to struggle a bit with the Old Testament and think, well, that God seems quite grumpy, and the God of the New Testament seems a bit more approachable with Jesus. But after a while, after I've been Christian for a while, and the more I read the Bible, the more I came to see Jesus is in the Old Testament. He's just not as obvious. So, yeah, I would really like to think that it would help people to discover a fresh appetite for the Old Testament and see where else they can find Jesus in the stories. And then secondly, I guess just that people will grow closer to him while they're reading it, as they, set aside that time every day to just look at the Bible, that they will experience his presence more closely with them.
And I suppose, sort of coming back to what you said a bit earlier, the whole sort of point of Advent, this sort of longing, this waiting, this looking forward to celebrating Christmas, the birth of Jesus, but also igniting that passion or that desire for his coming again, that second coming of
Absolutely.
him, and how the Old Testament points to Jesus coming in the nativity at Christmas time, but then also, maybe we could start looking towards that future, that second coming of Jesus as well, as we prepare our hearts in Advent.
Yeah, very much so.
We'll be back in a few minutes where we'll be chatting a bit more with Rachel Yarworth about her book, the Jesse Tree Anthology, and we'll also be finding out a little bit about her life and her faith as well. So do join us after these. If you enjoy listening to this podcast, you can help keep it on the web. All you've got to do is buy me a coffee. Head over to buymeacoffee.com/Matt McChlery to make a donation. There is a link in this episode's show notes. So go on, buy me a coffee today and help this podcast to keep supporting Christian books and authors. Hello, welcome back to the Christian Book Blurb. I am chatting with the author Rachel Yarworth about her book, The Jesse Tree Anthology. It's a brand new book just out in time for this year's Advent, so do go and grab yourself a copy. Just before the break, we were chatting quite a lot about the book. But Rachel, one thing we like to do on the show is to get to know our authors a little bit better, to kind of peel back the pages and find out who is behind the writing of these amazing books. I know there's loads of authors involved, but you've been the sort of one that's drawn it all together. So I'd like to find out about you and your life, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So we've already briefly mentioned your family. Would you like to tell us anything more about them?
Oh gosh, plenty more. Well, I've got three boys. I've also got two babies in heaven who I experienced miscarriage with. But my children are miracles. We were told we couldn't have any. And God said that he would give us children. So all of that story is really written in my first book. A sneaky plug-in for a second book there, Friend of God. That's a real testimony about our journey through barrenness, and then the children coming along on the miscarriages and so on. So yes, they're I would say they're my life. They're not. Jesus is my life, but after him, everything focuses around them. I'm so blessed, and the younger two are home educated. The older one is aged out now. So yeah, that's my primary call really. I spend most of my time home educating, especially my 15-year-old who's studying for GCSEs, and then I have to fit my writing around that.
I was going to say, does that leave time for anything else, like sort of personal time or time for a hobby or anything like that?
I would say at the moment writing is my main hobby. I do, if I'm not home educating or writing, because both of those are very much kind of stuck in the house activities. Certainly now GCSEs are on the horizon, we have to do a lot of at-home study. So I do like, when I get a chance, I like to get out and go for walks in the countryside and take my dog and my camera and just get out there and breathe. So that's probably, if I need some me time, if I need to take care of my mental health or something, then that's what I would probably do. But
I was going to say, where's your favorite place to go? Now it could be just you on your own, or it might be like a family holiday spot or something like that. Where in the world would you say is your favorite place to go?
That's a really good question. I've got lots. We like Cornwall. We like holidays in Cornwall. We like Wales. We don't tend to go abroad, largely ever since, bless him, my third child was born, and then just the thought of going on a flight with more children than adults.
And the number of bags that you've got to take. Oh,
yeah.
Goodness.
And obviously the cost and all that. But I think, we live in such a beautiful country and we still haven't seen it all. We've been holidaying in this country for 15 years and there's still a lot that I want to see. So,
and when you say this country, which country is that? In England. In case we have international listeners. And just now when you mentioned Wales, you were talking about the country Wales and not the sea creature.
Yeah, although we do love our wildlife. We've been on a few boat trips out to sea. Haven't seen a whale yet, but we have seen
I was going to say, have you seen a whale? Dolphins?
Not yet.
Nice. Did they swim along the side of the boat and all that, the dolphins?
The ones that we've seen so far have been quite elusive. They've just kind of popped up over the waves and peeked at us. But yeah, nothing more yet.
Good. And any favourite things to eat? Any favourite foods?
Really not much of a foodie.
No.
Sadly, I'm not.
Tea or coffee?
Tea.
Or no hot drinks at all?
I didn't used to drink any at all, actually, until I was pregnant with my youngest, because I just didn't like tea or coffee. I used to drink hot chocolate, but when I was pregnant with my youngest, it made me feel quite sick. So I decided I needed some kind of hot drink. So I started drinking tea then, and it's grown on me.
Oh, great. And speaking of Advent, have your family, I know you've mentioned reading sort of other Jesse Tree books and things, but have you and your family got any special Advent traditions, or sort of getting ready for Christmas type things that you try to do every year because, you know, they're a bit special to you?
I think the Jesse Tree is certainly the main one throughout the duration of Advent. The main tradition that we have, that we all love, is actually on Christmas Eve. I had my first miscarriage I actually experienced on Christmas Eve. So that was quite a traumatic time. And then my second miscarriage, the baby would have been due to be born on Christmas Eve. And so it became really important to me for my mental health to just keep that day as a quiet family day. So we just made a blanket rule that we don't take on any commitments on Christmas Eve. We just keep the day for us as a family. We go on an afternoon walk, eat pizza, and then in the evening the boys open a Christmas Eve box and we watch a retelling of the Nativity story. And that's our way of really remembering, you know, Jesus, our Emmanuel, God with us. So what came out of heartbreak and a very painful season has actually become the most treasured part. All of us as a family think that Christmas Eve is our favourite part of the season. So it doesn't matter what else happens over Christmas. We can have the rest of the season can be absolutely crazy because we've got that time, and it's just like a lovely mix of celebrating us as a family, but us as a family wrapped in Jesus's arms.
That's really special. Thank you for sharing that with us. This might be a crazy question because I know that as we're speaking now, you're in the throes of launching this brand new book, the Jesse Tree Anthology, and I know how crazy life can get trying to launch a book and get it out there. But here I'll ask it anyway. Have you got anything else coming up soon? Are you working on another book?
I actually am. I think I'm just as interested as you are. I've got 3 projects really on my heart at the moment. So I'm kind of working on all of them a bit and waiting to see which one emerges, which one comes to the front. I think at the moment I'm wanting to do a follow-up to Friend of God, but whereas Friend of God was really memoir and my story and my experience of my relationship with God, it's kind of born out of the questions that readers asked about, you know, how can I develop a friendship with God, and how do I get to hear his voice like I talk about in the book, and, you know, is it even biblical, and just really kind of go into those kind of more practical things. So I think at the moment that's the one that I think will be coming next, but don't hold me to it.
Oh, it sounds interesting. And just before we finish off today, where can people find you? Are you on social media? Have you got a website? And also, where can people buy your books?
I do have a website. Thank you for asking. It's rachelyarworthwriter.uk, and my books are on there. You can buy my books there. I am also on Facebook and Instagram, both of those as Rachel Yarworth Writer. And those are the best places really to keep up with me, my writing, my books. I'm also on Goodreads, but I have to confess I'm not very good at updating that.
Great. What we'll do for the benefit of our listeners is we'll put a link in this episode's show notes to Rachel's website, so you can click on that and it should take you straight through to all things Rachel Yarworth if you're wanting to go there. Well, Rachel, it's been great chatting with you. I hope that you have a great Advent season with your family. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
And thank you as well, the listener, for listening to this episode of the Christian Book Blurb. As you've heard in the last 2 episodes, Advent is coming up really soon. So I'm going to save the wishing you a Merry Christmas, not for this episode. You're going to have to tune in for our next episode, which will be coming out on the 1st of December. So do join us then for another wonderful episode where I chat with another Christian author about their books, their life, and their faith. Thanks for listening. Join us again soon. Goodbye. Thanks for listening to Christian Book Blurb. with your host, Matt McChlery. Do give it a like, give it a share, and let your friends know all about it. We do hope to see you again soon on another Christian Book Blurb.